So I am super excited to have on the show today two ladies who are they are doing their thing in the podcast world. Oh my goodness. So welcome to the show, Sheunopa Nopa. I had this conversation with her before where I was going to try to get her last name right. Mugobo.
That's right.
And Symone Dunn. Ladies, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us. We're happy to be here.
Yes, thank you.
So I am so excited just to get into this conversation with you guys. And really, on the show, we're constantly talking about just entrepreneurship and just sort of breaking out and carving your own lane and doing your own thing. And you two have been doing some amazing things with your podcast, Highkey Woke. Just talk to me a little bit about your why. Why even do this podcast? Talk to me about it.
Absolutely. So Highkey Woke Podcast, briefly for everyone listening, is our space and our guest space to essentially talk about all issues, corporate America, politics, and culture that affect the Black experience. So we're really focusing on the Black person, the Black experience, without all the other stuff, just centering in on, Black folks. And so our why, because there's not a lot of this being talked about right now, especially with what we're seeing in America, in our world. There's not a lot of people talking about this. There's not a lot of people telling our people to go out and vote. There's not a lot of people telling our people that you can be successful in corporate America. There's not a lot of people telling people, that, these things about culture don't have to shape who you are as a professional. So what we're trying to do is build that community and bring that voice to those issues to make sure that we have individuals that are empowered.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Now, talk to me a little bit too about, how you two decided to come together on this venture.
So Nopa and I started out as co-workers because we work for the same company. And if you let her tell it, she'll tell you oh, I was being super friendly, things like that. And I'm just I like to build community amongst my coworkers, especially the ones that we all, that we look alike, because we need that. And that kind of just sprouted into friendship. And, we talk about all types of topics, when it comes to career and career progression. We also talk about, just things that are going on within our social constructs. We also talk about, relationships, friendships. We talk about pretty much everything. And we were we have some pretty good conversation. Why would we not just record this and put it on a platform for, other people to hear? And that's kind of how we ended up being what, a podcast sounds like that might be the good move for us. So, here we are 1 year later.
Wow. So you guys never considered oh, maybe let's do a blog or let's start doing some YouTube videos, or did any of that cross your mind?
So in terms of why the podcast was the first thing, I think because we both kind of thought about it, but never really seriously, I could seriously do this until we had the conversations together. And also I think with a blog is great, but because there's the two of us and we have a natural chemistry that came even before the podcast, we want folks to hear the chemistry, to build off the chemistry, because we know that with podcasting, a lot of the times people come back and continue listening based on, sometimes being chemistry. So that was kind of the motivating factor to go down the route of a podcast. In terms of YouTube, we did just announce that we are venturing into the YouTube space say in a couple months. So towards the end of the year, you will get, our listeners will get to see us in YouTube in the space of kind of doing product reviews, as well as bringing some content from the podcast. So it's all happening. So slowly but surely.
Right. Baby steps.
I hear you. It takes those small steps to get where you want to go, right? Or it's overwhelming. I love it. So thinking about the show, and you guys already know I resonate with what it means to be in corporate, and all the life and all the stuff that comes along with it. Now that you have your show that's been out there for a while, just talk to me about maybe what have either been reactions from other people in corporate. Have you seen any differences in maybe coworkers that you know that maybe know about your show or anything like that? Have you experienced anything here?
In terms of the coworkers route, I will be very honest. Most of my teams in the last year since we've launched the podcast have been full of white individuals, and so the conversation never really comes up like, oh hey, check out my podcast, or hey, or we don't follow each other on social media for them to be able to see that I do the podcast. So I, on my end, in terms of my coworkers and my projects and my teams, it hasn't come up because I get exhausted. So I just let work and personal. And in terms of folks who do listen to the podcast, who are our friends, who are connected to us, a lot of people say, you know, I really love this episode. I really like, in terms of like the mental health episodes, we've done a few of those. People seem to really resonate with the content that we have on the mental health episodes. And so for us, it's always about not reaching the many, but reaching the one. If one person is happy, one person is, you know, content, they've learned something, then hey, we've done our job and we have fun doing it anyway. So it's no sweat off our backs.
Right. You know what I find interesting, and I take this from my own experience, right? Being in corporate and at the time doing the podcast, a podcast, by the way, that was heavily promoting leaving your 9 to 5, right? While I was still in my 9 to 5. It's interesting because one of the, you know, mindset things, and I was glad I was able to sort of let that go, but one of the things that I carried with me was just this sort of fear. And I think a lot of people do have that. Like when they're pushing out on a journey that they're passionate about, that's needed in the world, sometimes there's that fear of like, oh, what's my job gonna say? Like, how is this gonna go down? Like, do you guys ever experience that? And if so, how do you push past it?
I think that I was like, let me take a second to kind of like think through that. But I think that I don't think that we are like, you know, sharing any type of like confidential information or information that would, you know, cross the line or anything like that. I mean, like, you know, at the end of the day, like we have our First Amendment right to have free speech and to use our, you know, our voices to say what it is that we want to say, need to say, like to say, as long as there isn't any type of malice or ill intent. So I think that we've been doing like a good job of remaining conscious of like, yes, this is our platform and we can say what we want to say, but also keeping in mind that, you know, our information is, you know, out there to the public. So, you know, keeping in mind like our brand and things of that nature, like we don't want anything to negatively reflect on us.
Yeah, and I think also we've done a really great job of not dropping names, right? If you happen to find out we work, great, it's not a problem, but we don't drop too many names, and we try not to you know, we've talked about experiences that are directly a result of our work environments, but we never drop names. But also I think we're getting to a place where we're becoming we are professional women, we are smart women, but we're also Black women, and we're becoming very unapologetic about the things that we are saying. So I'm not going to be shy about talking about racism in the workplace. I'm not going to be shy about talking about racism when it comes to performance achievement. I'm not going to be shy about those things. And so there's a mix of professionalism, of, you know, being careful about how the content being curated, but then there's also a huge piece of being unapologetic, because we've done this thing as Black people where we have been very, respectability politics, and we just want to, and this is not going to work anymore, especially with what's going on right now in our country. We're seeing it that this is not going to work for us to continue being just, what will think, and, you know,
so passive about it.
Exactly. So it's a combination of all of those things.
Right. Oh my gosh, like preach. That's all I can say, because it's so true. And there are, unfortunately, so many of us, and you know, because I'm sure you've seen it too, who were so wrapped up in, you know, okay, well, I'm here and I've got to act a certain way because I'm a Black woman, and there are already stereotypes associated with me. So let me just make sure I fit into this box and don't color too far out the lines. But you guys are a perfect example. Like, if you're not bringing your whole self and dealing with the real issues, how do you help people through, right? like you essentially have to be you. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me a little bit about, as you're building, Highkey Woke and building your audience and all this good stuff, what have been some of your challenges, especially doing this while, working a job full time?
I think some of the more obvious challenges are just comes with building a podcast when you've never been a podcaster, you're not a podcaster, you're not, up to the podcasting industry. So when we first started out, we had a lot of technical difficulties and a lot of, maybe content difficulties. So those more logistical challenges that come with building something new that you haven't done before. I personally, it sounds cliche, but this is speaking for me. I don't necessarily think we've had major challenges outside of just learning how to build our brand, learning the marketing side, learning the content side. But in terms of like real, pain point challenges, I personally would say that I haven't come across any. Of course, you have to learn when there's two or more people, you have to learn how to work together. And then sometimes that can be challenging because you have like, okay, well, no, that's not what I think. And then, well, that's what you think. And sometimes we have had those conversations where it's like, okay, I don't really want to talk to you anymore right now. So let's talk tomorrow. Let's pick up again tomorrow. And this is just being honest because we're friends first. But I think that's, for me at least, my perspective. I don't know.
Yeah, I think for me, I'd say just the biggest problem is not having all the answers, but I feel like that's applicable to so many other different things. But I definitely echo everything Nopa said, like outside of, learning to grow your audience, mastering digital marketing, because that's just been like a whole other ball game that I've been completely unfamiliar with. I would definitely say like it's been minimal on the difficulties, just more like the learning experience and the journey.
Right. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So as you're building out and you're discovering these different challenges to the side, what is something that you're super excited about as your path is evolving? You're adding in new channels and all of that. What are you like either super excited about, or what do you see for yourselves going forward?
That's a great question.
I mean, I have these all like super futuristic questions. I've got to tell everybody, like, these ladies, and I have to tell you this too. So with your logo, your branding, like the outlines, it is beautiful. And whenever I look at it, I'm just like, okay, strong Black women making it happen. And so I'm always a supporter of helping Black women get to wherever they're trying to go and go further and all that, which is why my mind is like, okay, where do you guys want to be? What's going on? What's what's the big vision you see for yourself?
I think one thing we've talked about is being, what can I say? I don't know if calloused is the word, but getting to a point where we are a voice of bridging the Black experience and the corporate world, finding how to be that bridge, right? Because many times we don't know how to bring the two together and make them one, and then we end up losing one or the other. So figuring out how we can be a voice for our listeners to be able to encourage them to be Black, be as Black as you need to be, but also be corporate, be entrepreneur, be content creator, be whatever that it is you need to be, but you don't have to give up your Blackness. So I think we're trying to figure that out because we're figuring it out for ourselves, right? So trying to figure out how we can then relay that to our listeners is going to be a really big accomplishment. I think when it happens, we're getting there, making baby steps, but when it happens, it's going to really be, I think I might cry, but that's a major thing we've talked about, where it's like, dang, we don't really see a lot of voices. Like when we're thinking about content, like some of the content we post, we try to find content that comes from Black voices or Black writers, and then it's like, well, dang, I don't see a lot of Black folks talking about what's a good example? Talking about, Symone, help me out. Black people talking about something, girl.
talking about well, for one, I can definitely say like with the Don't Touch My Hair episode, for example, like we received like really good feedback from people that listen to the episode, and like people that can relate to the content, and they're like, you know what, this same exact situation happened to me, and I had, you know, a very similar reaction to this. Or even like recently, honestly, I think it was an episode that we dropped with you. One of my girlfriends listened to the episode, and she was like, you know, I'm just gonna let you know, like, you know, I really feel like your podcast is very helpful. Like she had personally been struggling with, you know, making that next step in her career. And she was like, you know, after listening to this episode, like I know like what steps I need to take in order to you know, either decide if I want to advance or if I want to shift and completely pivot out of, you know, my corporate role. I was like, oh, like, you know, that it made my heart warm and melty and all that stuff.
Right, because you like somebody has taken some, like they have something they can hold on to to help them go forward in their life.
Right. Yeah, building that community. We're not, and by community, we don't mean like you pay a monthly subscription and then you get, no. We're not talking about any of that. That's not the direction that we're wanting to go. But community, we're meaning like just a space, right? A space where, you know, I can go here and I can find stuff about this. I can find somebody about this. That's why we have a lot of guests, because we want people to know this is somebody that you can go to. That's why we have our guests drop their, you know, social medias or contact information or whatever it be at the end of the episode, because we want you to know that I can't talk to you about investing. I can't talk to you about exiting, you know, the 9-to-5, but there's somebody that I talk to that can talk to you about it. So here you go. So it's building that community, that kind of, what's it called? That network, right?
Right.
Loosely network. Yeah.
Right. No, you're exactly right. And I know we're going to lose Mone here in a second. A question for you ladies. When you think about Black folks in corporate America, I won't even just say women, men and women, because I know you've got a variety of listenership. What is probably the biggest thing you think that they're struggling with right now?
That's a question.
Yeah.
And I know we're on Front Street, like right now. That's for sure.
I can definitely say there are a few things that first came to my mind as far as struggles in corporate America. I think first thing I thought of was I look at leadership and nobody looks like me. And with that comes with, well, what does upward mobility look like? What's happening when I'm trying to move up? Why do I not see that many people that look like me as I'm moving up? So what's going on with retention? What are you doing to make sure that I stay, that you want me to stay at this company in this role? What are you doing for my growth? I feel like those are like the main things that at least that I can first think of that I think is one of the really big struggles. That and just relationships with different types of management and different leadership styles. I also feel like that plays a really big factor as far as advancement in, you know, your role, your company, etc.
And I think to tack onto that, I think we're also struggling with diversity and inclusion. We're not quite getting it just yet in the workplace because we have situations where people don't understand the actual definition of diversity and inclusion, and that you can't have, you know, diversity without inclusion. And then you bring in the aspect of equity in there, and people just are losing it. And most people in our corporate world think that when we say diversity and inclusion, it means sprinkling the occasional white woman around and everything is right. So until we'll leave until you put in the white woman check, we are inclusive, and it's like no. We need to understand what diversity and inclusion looks like, and then we need to understand making game plans as to how we get our corporations to be, you know, check to be actually passing when it comes to diversity and inclusion. We need to talk about it in our performance reviews. We need to talk about it in our leadership, in our retention, in our recruiting. What does that look like? And until I think diversity and inclusion is really understood, the points that, you know, Symone mentioned in terms of like retention and all that stuff, that's not going to ever be fixed because we don't understand why it's necessary for it to be fixed. You know what I mean? So, and I think diversity and inclusion influences a lot of aspects about our corporate and our professional lives that we don't realize. And until we realize that, I don't know, there'll be a lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think when you talk about Nopa really realizing like, okay, why do you really need diversity? And then really connecting into that, not just because it's a buzzword.
Right.
Symone, when you talked about looking around and not necessarily seeing people who look like you at the next level, it just made me think about, my eyes are watering here. It just made me think about a conversation that I had with a senior officer before I left my corporate company. And we had very candid conversation, right? There are not a lot around that look like me where I came from, very few. And you talk about director level and up, no one. And so I just remember saying to him, while I may be a unicorn in here, I'm not a unicorn in the world, right? And so until we again connect with that appreciation for diversity, the appreciation that, women like us in corporate, smart, educated, Black, all this, we are not like anomalies. We exist in the world, right? Are you, recruiting in the right places? Are you this? Are you that? And so, yeah, that having that underlying connection, I agree with you completely. Don't let me get off on a tangent here though. Mone is getting ready to, I'm keeping time for you because I don't want you to miss your call.
I appreciate that.
She's got to bounce off here in a second, but where can people just hear more from you or connect with you two?
Yes. So on all our platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Highkey Woke Podcast, same across the board. That's where you can find a connection to our personal Instagram accounts if you would like to. Our names are, if you want to connect on LinkedIn, our name, I believe our names are on, do they show on the recording? I don't know, but
I'll make sure they're in the show notes.
Okay, yeah. I don't know, but yeah, if you want to connect on LinkedIn, you can definitely find us. Happy to connect. Not a problem.
Awesome. So I'm going to make sure that Nopa and Mone stuff is all in the show notes at CandaceSpears.com so that everybody can connect and listen, subscribe to the Highkey Woke Podcast. It is so worth it. Ladies, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
All right. And everyone, as I always say, take this, do not just hold on to it, take it and take some action. So I hope you have a great day, a great evening, whenever you're listening or watching, and I'll talk to you again very, very soon.